To the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
Buckle up. Let's dive in. Let's get into it, boys. How are you today? Welcome to another edition of the Security Squawk. Randy's in his top secret location, and Andre and I are in our same boring locations.
That's right.
Where are you, Randy?
I'm at a cybersecurity conference in Indy.
Nice. Never been to Indy. How's Indy?
I haven't really been around, so I really don't know. So seems like a pretty nice little town.
Awesome.
Learning about cybersecurity
Closed down pretty early.
What's that?
It does seem to close down pretty early, according to people that have already been here. And there ain't nothing wrong with that.
It's not like Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Is what you're saying? It's interesting. So welcome to the show, everybody. I am Bryan here with Andre and Randy, and we are going to switch it up a little bit this week on the show. And we're going to get into a discussion about what we have been talking about kind of a lot on this show lately, and that's this whole idea of third-party risk, but with a twist. We're going to give you the goods from our standpoint as MSP and IT business owners and kind of break it down for you in terms of what that's going to mean for your business if you outsource to, say, an IT service provider, an MSP, or, you just don't do your own IT with your own employees. And, kind of some of the things we're going to talk about are going to apply to if you have employees too. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today revolves around regulations that are coming, laws that are coming that are going to impact our industry, which will eventually trickle down into your business. So it's going to be good for you to listen in today and pay attention to the changes coming to the IT industry in terms of laws, regulations, and all different kinds of things that are coming down the pipe that you need to be aware of. So this isn't a big surprise for your business. So before we jump into that content today, remember we bring all of this to you, the three of us. We take time out of our day to do this for you absolutely free of charge. We don't bore you with ads. We don't ask you for money. All you have to do in return for that effort is just help us grow our show by sharing the show, liking, if you're on YouTube or you're on our podcast, subscribe, and anything you can do from a social media standpoint to do that kind of stuff really helps us out. We appreciate whoever just liked us right now as we live stream this to Facebook and other places on the interwebs. Did I hit everything there, guys? Did I cover everything in terms of the fee for the show? Am I all good?
Yep. Like, subscribe, share. You got it.
We love it. So other than that, let's get into the content. So, boys, we were kind of starting our discussion a little early this morning in the green room. It was like right after I got out of the shower, it seemed. And we started kind of like throwing around the ideas as we do for the show today. And we said, hey, why don't we talk about kind of like a sidebar conversation that we were having about stuff that was going on in our industry. So we decided to kind of come up with this whole idea of let's start informing people of the things that we're aware of in our industry that we know are not only going to impact our businesses, but our clients' businesses, because there's some pretty big things coming down the pipe. And, what we try to do on this show is stay ahead of that curve so you are aware and you can either start having these conversations with your internal staff and whoever you're currently working with, or you can just have the awareness that like, hey, I might have an issue one day if I don't do something about this. We've talked about third-party risk from the standpoint of like, companies that have seen their payroll provider go down. There's even been companies who have been attacked and hacked because of a vendor that they work with. Heck, we just got a phone call the other day, guys, from a company that does CCTV installations. And funny enough, I like this story. You guys are going to like this one. I didn't tell you this one yet. they had a web server set up so their customers could download the executable file that they need to install the camera viewing software. Well, somebody decided to come along and modify that executable with their own code that then spread malware to all the computers that installed this executable file off this company's server. It wasn't a very small CCTV company either. They have a lot of customers. So we're going to help them figure this out, get it secured, make sure that nobody can modify code and upload, executables that have malware contained within the code or a couple lines of code. So what they did, Randy, you'll enjoy this one. The executable loads a bunch of different files on the system, and it uses JavaScript for the UI to make the UI look pretty. And they injected a bunch of codes of lines of code into the JavaScript files to go out to the internet and download malware. You're muted. You're muted.
I was just making a joke. I said, not too shabby.
It is not too shabby, but they were running things kind of shabby until they called us, right? Mm-hmm. So now they're gonna shore things up because, think about that, right? From the standpoint of that company who reached out to us, think about the damage that could cause their business if the companies that got this malware decided to turn around and file lawsuits against this company. That was actually my first question. I'm like, have you guys gotten sued over this yet? And they're like, not yet, but that's a possibility.
And I can very see that happening because we do a lot of buildings here in Miami. Yeah. And many times, these condominiums, they'll have their access control or camera vendor, call unannounced and say, hey, we're at the front desk and we stuck our USB drive in, nothing's happening. We try to run the executable, nothing's happening. And we need you to allow us to, put the software in. And, you expect them to do their due diligence and make sure that they're putting the right tool in. So I could easily see that happening. So it's pretty clever on the hacker side for a way to get in, because that's when a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, we need you to turn off your antivirus or your firewall because, something is happening with the software. And we think that's why your tool is competing with it or blocking it. So.
Yeah, 100%. So, these are all the interesting things that can happen to your company, right? Through third-party risks. And, we're not stupid to the fact that, our companies, and I think that's like why, we know each other pretty well, why the three of us and our companies take security so seriously, because we know that we hold the keys to the kingdom to these companies. And if we get hacked, there's a very good chance that they're going to get hacked, right, guys? So, we're talking about, this conversation was born because some of the things that, and I commented to you guys about some of the things that we're seeing in our space related to, the best way I can put it, quite frankly, is we've lived in an unregulated industry for such a very long time. Like most people in our industry, if they started when you could first start, you're talking, you're running the potential of meeting business owners who've been doing things a certain way for 30, 20 years at this point, right? So these habits are well ingrained, not only with each business, but pretty much within the industry. And, it's not hard for somebody in this industry, as we see in I'll correlate it to like social media, right? You see all these gurus around health and fitness, right? At the end of the day, the way I look at and you guys, I don't know if you share the same perspective, but I look at an Instagram or a social media influencer, right? And I look at somebody say, somebody who's muscular, right? And they work out all the time and their body looks really jacked. They got tons of muscles, and they're able to be an influencer on Instagram because their body is in really great shape and they look really good. At the end of the day, like most people, if they really work hard at it, and obviously some people have to work harder than others, can achieve that and become an influencer in that manner. So, I think a lot of that happens in our industry too. Unfortunately, we're not regulated. We're not like doctors. We're not like lawyers. We're not like accountants where they have to go through some kind of process in order to be able to practice in that industry, which leads to a lot of people who can seem like they're influencers or they're at the top of their game at something. And at the end of the day, if you actually look into it, they're not qualified to be speaking about whatever it is they're speaking about. And this is something that's a huge concern for a lot of people, not just me. There's a lot of people out there who are working in various industries in cybersecurity and in IT who are looking at what's going on, especially in like what's known as the MSP channel, and they're highly concerned about what they see. And what I explained to Andre and Randy as we were talking about this is like the big problem that I see for a lot of people out there is they don't understand that our industry is about to be regulated like doctors, like lawyers. So a lot of these people that are going out there, especially with like certain sectors of cybersecurity, like CMMC, when people are out there, saying that they're a CMMC expert and they're not even part of the CMMC ecosystem, which it's pretty easy to tell whether you're part of the CMMC ecosystem. That's equivalent to you going out there and saying, I'm a doctor and I'm a lawyer, and you're really not. And you're out here practicing law and you're practicing to be a doctor. When that happens in our society today, those people are brought to justice and they're prosecuted. And I think that's a huge shift that this industry is going to have to undertake in the next 5 years, where this industry is going to find themselves in a position where they can't be doing the things that they're doing today. So I know that was a long rant to open up the conversation. So I'm going to kind of toss it to you guys. And that's kind of where I want to start off the show and kind of say, like, what are your thoughts on all those things I just laid out?
So I'm a big proponent of the regulation. I think it's needed, but our industry, there's a lot of marketing that's involved. There's a lot of the way clients find us is usually through some type of social media or through some type of shiny object that they're seeing to then be able to say, let me call this company. They seem to know what they're talking about, versus if you're going to want to go to a doctor or an attorney, you're going to ask for references. You're going to want to make sure that this person has done, 100 heart surgeries and so forth like that. So I'm all for the regulation because, whatever I personally have to do or the business has to do to make sure that we meet the standards of whatever that, a government entity says that we have to do. I think it's needed. I think there's still a lot of trunk slammers, which are basically IT guys that usually are 1 or 2 man shows just going around, and the same solution that they give a 3-person office is the same solution that they give a 30-person law firm or doctor's office. Like that, it's all what they know. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think also there's the lack of regulation or the lack of education has also led to, we talked about this a little bit in the green room, but this huge disparity of budgets for IT. And, the reality is, I know we'll probably get into it more in a little bit, but the reality is a lot of businesses won't be able to afford to go to that next level because they're not bringing in the kind of money that it takes to be able to pay for the training, to be able to keep up with the training, to be able to implement the solutions. They're not charging enough money.
Yeah, when you say companies, when you're talking right now, you mean MSPs,
MSP
not client
right.
companies that
Right.
of MSPs, right? So,
yeah,
it's a great point.
Keep up, yes.
Yeah.
So
it's a great point. They're not, and I'll just go to like what I've always said over the years. Like my company was one of the 30 or 40 some companies that got the initial iteration of the CompTIA Security Trust Mark Plus. Like think what you want about that certification, we actually went through a process to prove to a third-party entity that we followed the NIST cybersecurity framework. So say what you want about that, it means something to somebody, right? And we are now going through the second iteration of that process with CompTIA, and we're doing it again with them, for the exact reason that you just laid out. And we know, just look at that number. Like, there's probably 100,000 MSP companies around the world, if not more, and only 30 achieve that level of certification. So yeah, in one hand, my view of this industry, for the most part, is most people are lazy in this industry. That's why we see a lot of the problems that we see, right? So what does that mean when I say most people are lazy? It means they're not going to go through the effort required to get these certifications, let alone pay the fees and the money associated with what goes along with it.
I wonder if there's also a lack of basically knowing what's going on out there and being aware.
100%.
I have a friend who works at a very large MSP. Recent hire, they at least hired this person in the security sector, if you will. But the conversation in this gigantic MSP, the conversation about security has been very minimal, because they don't really have, I think you mentioned this in the green room, but this particular company, like, they're not going to like trade shows and, cybersecurity show events, and they're not doing all that. They kind of already have their little niche, and they're just kind of doing their thing, and they're talking to who they talk to. So my friend's bringing in this whole brand new conversation of, here's what we need to be doing. And this is a MSP that, like I said, it's probably in the top 1%, if I had to guess. So anyway, I think there's also, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily lazy. It's just that they're in their own little echo chamber and not really aware of what's going on out there.
Right. No, there's 100%. There's a piece of that too. And there's a piece of that also leads to, when you were talking there, I'm thinking like, man, like, how does a business person understand, the different nuances and the different levels of like a company like ours, who might be more, say, MSP channel focused, versus a company like, I talked to a CEO the other day who didn't even know much about the channel at all. They didn't know the big players and who owned what products and services. And, because the way that they buy and the way that they run their MSP is strictly through a couple key vendors. And that's how they get all their solutions and all their products. And they're fine with that. And that's how they've grown their business to a multinational company. So they're not lazy, because you don't grow to that level of being lazy. But at the same time, they have a much different perspective, and I don't know what's better or worse. But how does a business owner discern that? You know what I mean? And that's hard to do. That's hard to, when you're looking at two companies going, you're not going to see the level of the differences between a company who might be channel focused, who might be able to bring, I think the advantage that we have versus like buying through the big vendors that, that can be an option for us, go into these events and all that stuff, we're going to be able to bring newer solutions to the market quicker. Right. So if you want to be ahead of the curve, if you want to be on the cutting edge, if that's important to your business and you want to align yourself with an IT company that is like that, then getting, asking a company whether they're channel focused or not, might make a lot of sense if you understand what that means. You know what I mean, guys? Like, because it really will depend on whether you're going to get a tried and true solution that may be 3 or 4 or 5 years old at this point, which is typically what you get from the big vendors, versus, like, you're not going to find any AI cybersecurity solutions through a big vendor. Like those haven't been vetted. They don't have enough sales yet to where a big vendor is going to, go sell them and stick their neck out and sell them and put them in their kind of ecosystem. You go to these trade shows, all you need to really do is buy a booth and sponsor yourself, and you can, stand up your AI cybersecurity company that helps MSPs, with some of the challenges that we have, right? And that's where you're going to find those companies, right? Because they don't have very many customers. They don't have a lot of sales. And companies that aren't going to those events, like you said, Randy, aren't going to be providing those types of solutions. So, you might put you behind the eight ball a little bit. Mm-hmm. Andre, you've been quiet. So what are your thoughts on vendor selection from that standpoint?
Well, I personally wouldn't have known half of the stuff that I know now if it wasn't for the vendors, and for me to go in a room and for them to tell me like the problem that I know I have, but I didn't know that there was a solution for it. So when I do go to these conferences, and it's kind of like, buying candy from the candy store and trying to like make sure that you don't go too crazy, because there's been times where I've gone to these, conferences, and then you start buying stuff that, yes, you need, but then you're not ready to implement. And then it just sits there 6 months, 8 months later. But for me, I like going to those type of conferences and just hearing out what's out there. And not to say that I need every single product, but just good to know.
So you're in the camp of conferences versus, say, buying from one of the big 3 vendors that are our industry.
Yes, because with the conferences, I can then hear from my peers about how great the product is, or how iffy the product is. So that's because if I'm calling one of those bigger distributors, I don't know, I just don't feel that community. So it's just going to be that sales guy that just says, "Hey, it's been vetted. It's
right.
It's
a good solution."
Right.
You're trusting a salesperson versus a peer who may have experience with that, like we did in agreement earlier when I trashed a product for 20 minutes. So moving right along, Randy mentioned cost, right, and price, and that is going to be a big factor moving forward for a lot of different reasons, right? I'm going to focus on CMMC a little bit, probably on this show, and just so people understand what CMMC is very quickly. CMMC is the Department of Defense's way to make sure that contractors are actually following the NIST cybersecurity framework and protecting classified information, federal contract information, or controlled unclassified information, whatever you might be using as part of your contract, that information needs to be protected. They've gone on the honor system in the past, and they know that system is broken, and they're putting a system in place that is supposed to work better from a lot of different aspects. Things that they consider are things like collusion and fraud between the assessment teams and people being involved in the assessment and the customer. There's a lot of thought into this process to make sure it's as legit and as clean as possible. So that's CMMC, and that's what I'm going to refer to a lot. It stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model, and it's governed by the DoD, and it's going to be rolled out to all defense contractors. And the big thing with that is there's 3 different levels that companies may have to achieve as part of their contract. Level 1 being the easiest, which is fairly easy for most companies to achieve. 2 and 3 are a little bit more strenuous and require an assessment that costs money. And Randy kind of alluded to this a little bit when he talked earlier, where if you want to be level 2, you're basically looking at a minimum cost of $25,000 every time you need to be assessed. So right there, a lot of IT companies. So like, here's the big warning, and this isn't going to just be a thing for CMMC. CMMC is like the first. That's why I'm focusing in on it. A lot of these other regulations, that are already out there are going to conform to what CMMC is, or CMMC is going to spread throughout the government, which means that a lot more companies are going to be impacted by this, which means there's like a trickle down effect here, right? There's like those enterprise and mid-market companies who a lot of small businesses will work for or service those companies. And as soon as you start to enter into contracts and agreements with those bigger companies, because they're being required by the government or their clients to do this the right way, they're going to require you to do it the right way, because part of what they have to do is evaluate third-party risk. So if they look at your company and they decide that working with you is going to be a risk for them from a cybersecurity standpoint, then they will not work with you, right? So like, this is the trickle-down effect that we're trying to make businesses aware of, that one day this is going to show up at your front door, whether it be in language in a contract, a law that your state or local officials, pass and then apply to your business, or some kind of industry regulation that you have to adhere to because you're in a regulated industry. It's going to show up in one of those three ways. We're seeing it all over the place, and everything that shows up at somebody's front door requires them to spend more money.
I can't wait.
You can't wait.
I can't wait. No, because the thing is, I think it's gonna put the bigger boys who wants to go over, to go for that, milk and honey, so to speak, type of government contract, to say, okay, you know what? Let's go focus here, because we have this certification, we have all these requirements, and let's go make our milk and honey from the government. And hopefully they leave the smaller ones for us, not you, Bryan, but for me and Randy, to then go fight over. Because right now you're kind of in both. You could do here, the milk and honey, and then you can do the side of fries. So you go take your milk and honey, we'll keep our side of fries, and we'll be in our different levels.
Randy.
I mean, not much to add to that. I think not just from a compliance standpoint, though, speaking from a budget standpoint, there is money and effort required for compliance. There's also money, time, effort required for security stack, and for having the bandwidth, like having the labor bandwidth to analyze cases and act on cases that are opened up when security events happen in your organization. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, or a lot of other things around this that indirectly as well are going to cause, the budgets to go up.
Right. So in a nutshell, what you're kind of alluding to is the fact that it's like a double-edged sword, right? Companies aren't paying enough or investing enough in cybersecurity, right? But at the same time, there's this whole underbelly of in the business world of companies that work with MSPs and IT companies that aren't charging enough, right? That are leading to what you're laying out: the inability to upskill, the inability to go out and get certain certifications, the inability to train staff and stay up on top of things, simply because you just don't have the time, money, and resources to do so. And these are all things that are going to impact your business in the very near future. And like, unfortunately, people think like it's not going to happen. It's never happened. Well, yeah, no kidding, because this is all new stuff, right? It's never happened before, and it's going to happen, unfortunately, to businesses. So either you're going to be prepared or you're not.
Yep.
So that's it, boys. We got to run. Randy's got a top secret convention to get back to, and Randy and Andre and I got to go do work. So we'll see everyone next week. Thanks for the support. And Tony, I saw your comment. If I have an update for you in a future show, I'll definitely update you. So we'll see everyone in the next episode. Remember, share the show. Take care. Stay safe out there.